Hey guys and girls, today I'm going to cover the Section 5 notes on Postwar prosperities. Hopefully you completed the note guide and you are reviewing or checking your note guide and making any corrections that you need to. Alright, we're going to cover the following 4 objectives, describe how the U.S. made the transformation to a boom peacetime economy. So we're going to go from wartime economy, producing war goods, weapons, materials, etc., to domestic consumer goods. We're going to talk about the growth of the Sun Belt and the effects of that migration there. Sun Belt, we're talking Florida, Arizona, New Mexico. We're going to describe the changes in the U.S. economy in the post-war period, shift from an industrial, agricultural economy to a more service economy. And then lastly, we're going to discuss the accomplishments and leadership qualities of 2 post-war presidents, Harry S. Truman and Dwight D. Eisenhower. So let's start with the United States after World War II. So we have returned soldiers. They're going to need jobs. Congress is going to pass a GI Bill of Rights. That's going to provide them with a year's salary while they look for jobs. It's going to help them find jobs. It's also going to provide them with free college education as well. Americans who put off having children during the war, of course, is going to lead to a baby boom, or the boomer generation, increased population by 27%. There you can see 2021 population pyramid, so a year off. But the early boomers will be hitting the ages 70, 74. So really right now, as I'm doing this video, we have most of the baby boomers getting close to retirement generation. So baby boomers are going to have a huge impact on U.S. history and American society as they age, because they're going to be the largest generational block. For example, today, because they're in retirement age or about retirement age, increase in medical costs. It's just a fact of life. Older people need more medical care. So it's creating demand for doctors, nurses. It's increasing cost, medical care. So it's a huge economic factor as well. As you can see in the right graphic, their largest generation U.S. history. By 2030, the number of people over the age of 65 is projected to be 71.5 million. About 25% of the U.S. population, a little higher. So more than a quarter of the population will be over 65. That's a huge percentage. By 2029, all the baby boomers will be in retirement age, over 65 at that point. Currently, they make up 24.3% of the U.S. population. So, like I said, about a quarter. 56% of baby boomers hold leadership positions, whether in government or jobs, workplace. And 31% of the workforce are baby boomers. So that's some interesting facts about that generation, just to show you that they are the largest generation. We also have the end of wartime restrictions, things like rationing, so you can only buy so much bread, or price controls that the government instituted, so there couldn't be forms of price gouging. Things we see kind of going on right now, just to relate the coronavirus epidemic in the country, you have states competing against each other for masks, ventilators, etc., which is driving up the price. Well, during World War II, the federal government instituted price controls, so that would not happen. But it did increase demand and increased inflation by ending the rationing and price controls. Demand soared. You have higher employment, increased production. People now have time and money for leisure goods, and it's going to lead to a huge increase in demand. Because of this higher employment and increased production, it's going to improve the standard of living. Arguably, the highest standard of livings were the post-World War II generation, baby boomers, and so on. Really, between end of World War II and around 2000, really, the standard of living always increased. We're also going to have massive technological progress that's going to lead to increased productivity. In economics, you learn about the importance of technology, but technology increases productivity, it saves money. It does replace labor to some extent, but not so much at this time period. That's more of a millennium problem. Military spending that's never going to decrease. It's actually going to continue to increase after World War II. We'll talk more about that with the Cold War. We already have, I should say. Military spending increases pretty much every year after World War II. It also helps to support growth, new technology, and foreign demand. All right, next I want to talk about migration to the Sun Belt. All right, so why did Americans move to the Sun Belt? Well, first and foremost, why do people move to Florida, Arizona, Mexico? It's warm, it's sunny weather, nice climate. And you can see these Sun Belt states, Arizona, Nevada, Florida, their increase in population in this time period was over 50%. Same with Alaska, but Alaska was still a relatively new state. That's kind of a outlier. This is obviously not a Sunbelt state. Sunbelt states also didn't interact. We always kind of think of it as older people who go to retirement, and today, significant form of migration to the Sunbelt states is older people in retirement. But you had young workers as well, because you had booming industrial economies in these states. Fields like aerospace and electronics. You had growing cities like Houston and Los Angeles. And another cause actually is the development of air conditioning. Before, one of the factors to not move to these states was because it was so hot. Well, with air conditioning, you can now live in a hot state, but indoors be at a comfortable temperature. You also had a huge increase in Latinos into the Sunbelt states. You had Cubans escaping the Fidel Castro regime, which we'll talk about more next unit, and the new communist regime in Cuba, to places like South Florida, or you also had Mexicans moving west to cities like Phoenix and LA, taking jobs. So what were the effects? Well, one is a growing population. Some of that's due to the baby boomers, but also migration from Latinos from outside the country. Also shifts political power. Nevada, Arizona, Florida, 3 huge important states in presidential elections today. Because of their growing population during this time period and over the next couple decades, gives them more electoral votes when the presidential election occurs. Does also create some environmental concerns. Traffic jams. LA has some of the worst traffic in the world. Smog. Water shortage is a big one, and especially in the Southwest, Nevada, Phoenix, Nevada, Arizona, California. These places have severe water shortages, and it's a genuine concern in the next couple decades that we actually could feasibly not have enough water for the populations in those states. So that is definitely something to keep an eye on. Another effect, you lose valuable land to construction, suburban development, homes, etc. Schools, roads, businesses, all take up some of the land that was unoccupied previously. All right, let's move on to innovations in economic development. So for much of our country's history, we were an agricultural economy. Farmers. We were a nation of farmers. This goes all the way back to Jeffersonian politics. His presidency, he believed that we were an agrarian nation. Of course, by the Gilded Age, as we talked about, you have Industrial Revolution. We shift from, by 1920, we shift from a nation of majority farmers to majority working in industries and factories. Well, post-World War II, we shift now to the majority of people work in a service economy. And you can see today, from 2016, but same as today, 80% of our economy is service. 19% is industry, and only 1% is agriculture, which might come to a surprise. Most of the farming today is now big corporate farms. So what is a service economy? Well, service economy provides service. It could be things like education. I'm providing a service by teaching you about the post-war economy. Healthcare work. We just talked about baby boomers entering old age and retirement. Financial activity. Bankers, accountants, stockbrokers. Government. Members of Congress. Anyone who works for the Food and Drug Administration, the Securities Exchange Commission. You get the idea. That would all be service. Information. Companies that analyze data, Forensic accountants, for example. Leisure and hospitality, resorts, hotels, Disney World. Professional and business services, that could be plumbers, electricians, could also be accountants as well, could fit in that category. Transportation and utilities, transportation, obviously public buses, airlines, utilities, electric companies, cable companies, wholesale and retail sale trades, or Walmart, Amazon. All right, so you get the idea. So majority of 80% today, maybe even a little bit more since from 2016, work in service-related fields. So we have new information industries. You have, and there's a piece of what the first computer looked like. It was actually much bigger, much bigger. Our tiny little phones are more powerful than that big computer right there. Just to show you how drastically technology has evolved. And that's not even the full thing. It's just a piece of the first computer. But new information industries using computer and data evolve. The women in the labor force doubled between 1940 and 1960. We obviously talked about during World War II, Rosita Riveter. Women fill in the void left by men going off to fight. Well, most women never gave up those jobs when the men returned. You have a decline in farmers. 25% of American farmed pre-war, less than 10% post-war. At the same time, farming production increased. Again, I said farming really becomes the corporate farm structure, mass producing the goods. You have new opportunities for entrepreneurs, individuals who can start up their own company. Then you have things like Walmart and McDonald's forming around this time. You have the rise in franchise businesses. McDonald's is another example. They would sell franchise licenses, so a private entrepreneur could start a McDonald's. There's some other examples of franchise businesses, things like Taco Bell, Holiday Inn. Corporations go multinational. So before, where a lot of corporations worked explicitly within the United States, not any longer. Now they might open offices. They may be based in the United States, but they might open offices in Europe, Japan, etc. Lastly, you also have the two largest labor unions, American Federation of Labor and the Congressional Industrial Organization, unite. But most new white-collar workers did not join unions. You're going to see, especially after Truman administration, the decrease in power labor unions, where they reached their height under FDR. His New Deal legislation really strengthened labor unions. You're going to see a decrease under Eisenhower. And then really by the 1980s under the Reagan administration, really going to go after labor unions. All right, President Truman's post-war leadership. So Truman faced labor unrest and combative Republican Party that passed the Taft-Hartley Act, outlawing the closed workshop. He also established a special committee on civil rights to investigate race relations that recommended several reforms, all of which were rejected by Congress. So he did try to touch on civil rights. Of course, was never successful because Congress ultimately rejected those bills and reforms. He championed an effort to launch a national system of health insurance, but Congress turned it into the Hill-Burton Act that benefited doctors, hospitals, and private insurers. So we talk about this idea of Medicare for all. You see that in the Democratic Party today, but it's not that new of an idea. We've had several presidents throughout history. Lyndon Johnson will also do it. Propose national system of health insurance. You also have the Southern Democrats, known as the Dixiecrats, who leave the party over Truman's support of civil rights. We talked about the New Deal coalition under FDR, which brought African Americans into the Democratic Party. And I said, even at that point, you started to see Southern Democrats leave the Democratic Party. Well, with Truman's support of civil rights, you pretty much see all the Southern Democrats or Dixiecrats leave the party. And then for a while there, you're generally voting Republican, but they're not yet officially part of the Republican Party. You're going to see, we'll talk about Nixon's Southern strategy. Nixon and then Reagan continues embracing the Southern Democrats, and now they are members of the Republican Party. And you can see Strom Thurmond will be one of the candidates for the Southern Democrats, or the Dixiecrats. But Truman's failure to win support for his Fair Deal legislation, his civil rights, we talked about the stalled war in Korea already, led him to not seek re-election in 1952. As I mentioned, he leaves office one of the least popular presidents. Today, historians generally consider him one of the 10 best presidents, and obviously, knowing what we know now, it's easier to judge his presidency than it was at the time. The Korean failure really left a bad taste on his presidency. There's a good video on Truman you can watch. And that'll be a wrap-up for today, girls. Hope you enjoyed. I will see you soon.